Welcome back to the show, guys. Okay, so everything is stupid in America. Everything is stupid. Everything sucks. I'm just kidding. There are obviously redemptive, amazing things going on in the country and in the culture. Alexander Pope said, "Hope springs eternal from the human breast." Actually, I got an Alexander Pope book right there on his works. We'll crack that open sometime on the show. But everything else is stupid. Okay. This is one of the this is one of the stupidest, most evil, inverted, upside down, perverted, twisted stories that I've ever come across. But unfortunately, it's sort of indicative of where the culture, I think, actually already is, and where we're going to increasingly be headed if nothing changes soon. Okay? This is one of those stories that, like, if I had said this would be happening in 2024, in the year 2010, when I graduated high school, I would have been dismissed as like the weirdest conspiracy theory, Alex Jones, like psycho in the entire conservative political pundit movement. And now it's like, actually, this is one of many stories like it. This story is not even isolated anymore. It's not even unique anymore. This one's just a little bit weirder. Like it's got a little bit more liberalism sprinkled onto it than maybe the other ones like it. You heard the introduction correctly. A baby killer child murderer wants to become a eunuch and wants your tax dollars to pay for it. Welcome to modernity. Welcome to the rotten fruit of liberalism. An Indiana judge has just ruled, as of September 23rd, that a prison must provide transgender surgery for an inmate who strangled and killed an 11-month-old baby, says Jamie Joseph, writing for Fox News on September 23rd. Here's what Jamie Joseph at Fox says. A federal judge has ruled that it would be unconstitutional for an Indiana prison to deny a transgender inmate sex reassignment surgery following the inmate's lawsuit against the facility. So the prison inmate, okay, has sued the prison because a federal judge, has sued the prison, and now a federal judge is saying that this prison has to provide genital surgical removal with your taxpayer dollars. The ACLU sued the Indiana Department of Corrections last year on behalf of a transgender inmate, Jonathan C. Richardson. Okay, now we have a picture of Jonathan C. Richardson here for you, who apparently now wants to be known as Autumn Corleone. I mean, look at this dude. What is that? Is that some, like, Satan tattoo? By the way, probably, actually. It probably is. I actually tried researching this for you guys before going into the studio right now for this episode, because I was like, I bet that's some weird pentagram. I bet that's some weird satanic tattoo, but I couldn't find reporting like verifying that either way, but it sure looks like it. Let's just say that, okay? So now Jonathan C. Richardson, who you just saw, okay, wants to be called Autumn Corleone, who was convicted of, listen to this, of strangling and murdering his 11-month-old stepdaughter to death in 2001. I'm sorry, but we need to make the death penalty great again. I just lost every moderate progressive pro-lifer, and I don't care. By the way, this is sort of a debate that's been raging and relaunched recently, towards the end of September of this year, because there were a couple capital punishment cases that just happened. I think one in Texas and one in, I forgot the other state. And everyone's freaking out because we hardly ever perform the death penalty anymore in America. Like, it rarely happens. Do you understand this? And when it does, it tends to not be the swift hand of justice. It tends to be 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20 years after the incident that got them convicted and punishable by the death penalty. Like, rarely are capital punishment cases actually dealt out, and certainly never dealt with swiftly. So when pro-lifers and conservatives say, I oppose the death penalty because it's not actually a deterrent. I don't know, have you heard this argument? It says it's not actually a deterrent, meaning people aren't less likely to perform the crimes that would get them the capital punishment. They don't believe that capital punishment actually acts as a disincentive against those behaviors in the public. Now, that may be true, but if it is, the reason is that capital punishments are not dealt out swiftly, and they're not dealt out consistently. Meaning, some dude might do something that gets him the death penalty and he's killed 15 years later. Some dude might do a similar action, some murderous action, and he gets let off. So we're not communicating sort of moral truths and standards through our legal system, through the courts, through the death penalty, capital punishment. And so, of course, it doesn't act as a disincentive or a deterrent because it's not actually done appropriately. I am an advocate of the death penalty, okay? But I also believe in mercy, okay? The death penalty should be handed out very cautiously when you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person in question is completely, verifiably, demonstrably guilty of the crime that's been alleged, okay? Even better when they've admitted to it. That would obviously be the best. But when they don't, if there's overwhelming, beyond a shadow of a doubt evidence, when it comes to murder, okay, especially heinous acts of murder, unrepentant acts of murder, the kind of people who like boast and brag about this stuff, I do believe that there are instances in those heinous acts where the death penalty should be exercised. And if we did that consistently, okay, I think we would see a massive decrease in some of those crimes that unfortunately are becoming more and more common in the Republic. People misunderstand the pro-life support for death penalty. They think that because you're pro-life, you believe in the sanctity of life. And so, therefore, how could you support killing someone and having the state kill them when you believe in pro-life? That's not what pro-life means, guys. Pro-life means it's always wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings, okay? Yeah. If you're getting the death penalty, you're probably not an innocent human being. Now, have there been instances where someone who was actually later showed innocent was killed by the state? Yes. And that's why I'm very cautious of proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person getting killed is actually guilty of the crime being alleged, because I don't want an instance where someone who's innocent is killed, for goodness sakes, okay? But when exercised consistently, okay, the death penalty is actually a legal recognition of the sanctity of human life and the seriousness of taking innocent human life, right? Genesis 9, right? This is the Noahic covenant, when God, this is before Israel exists, right? So you can't say, oh, well, it was just an Israel sort of ceremonial or civil law at the time. No, this predates Israel. God says, if man sheds blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For the image of God has God made mankind. So that's Genesis 9, linking the Imago Dei to the seriousness of shedding innocent blood. The Christians have believed for most of church history that killing and murdering innocent human beings is killing God in effigy. It's a proxy war attack against God himself, because God created man in his image. That act of murdering innocent human beings is so serious that you forfeit your right to life by killing the innocent. So justice requires, as the Apostle Paul says in the New Testament, that the state does not bear the sword in vain. Meaning there's a reason that the state bears the sword. Now, I'm not calling for the church to bear the sword, or for pastors or Catholic bishops or something to start killing people. I'm saying that that God has ordained government for specific things that the church is not ordained for. And so the state does not bear the sword in vain. You have forfeited your right to life by slaughtering and murdering innocent human beings. So, believe it or not, the death penalty is actually pro-life, because justice is part of mercy. Justice is part of compassion. So we need to give mercy where it's deserved, but we also need to give justice where it's needed. And nothing is more serious than murdering innocent human beings. What's my point in all of that? This dude strangled and murdered his 11-month-old stepdaughter to death and then bragged about it later. That's who we're talking about right now, okay? I think if those kinds of people were hung in the public square within 48 hours, I think a lot more innocent children and innocent human beings who would have otherwise been murdered or abused by animals like this would be protected, because the law would actually begin to function as a deterrent, because it was the capital punishment was actually being practiced, where virtually it's never carried out today in very rare circumstances. So that's a lot of the debate around this stuff, actually, is can you be pro-life and support the death penalty and support punishing people like this by taking their life? I think the answer is yes. I think the state has a role to do that. This is the historic pro-life position, by the way. It's only been in the last 100 years, 80 to 100 years or so, that it's become hip, modern, cool, and popular for pro-life individuals to say, I have to oppose the death penalty to be consistently pro-life. No, you don't. To be pro-life is to say we shouldn't kill innocent babies in the womb. Okay, that nobody snuck an AK-47 into the uterus. Okay, the baby's not murdering you. The baby's an innocent child. This dude is a transgender, autogynephilic, possibly pedophile child murderer who admits to abusing children and murdering babies, who now says he's a woman. That's not the same as a baby in the uterus. Newsflash, newsflash. So these things have to be treated differently. And the failure of many pro-lifers to recognize that is pretty pathetic. So Jamie Joseph continues in her Fox News article here about Jonathan Richardson, who in 2001 strangled and murdered his 11-month-old stepdaughter to death. The Daily Wire actually reported that Richardson told correction officers in prison, he said, well, all I know is I killed the little effing bitch, end quote. Wow. What a lovely gender-deluded autogynephilic murderer. What a lovely person. I think being behind bars for life would be the very minimal requirement of justice in this case. The very minimal requirement of justice. This is someone who years later jokes about murdering their 11-month-old stepdaughter, strangling her to death, and calling her a little effing bitch. Indiana law, however, prohibits the Department of Corrections from using taxpayer dollars to fund sex reassignment surgeries for inmates. Okay, so Indiana legislators haven't completely lost their freaking minds. However, the ACLU argues, says Fox News in the lawsuit filed on August 28, 2023, that the law is a violation of the 8th Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. Oh my gosh. So today, let's see, cruel and unusual punishment means my neighbor's taxpayer dollars can't be used to pay to slice my penis off while I'm in prison for murdering my stepdaughter. Oh, cruel and unusual punishment. Have we lost our freaking minds in this country? The ACLU. The ACLU. What a joke that organization is. If anyone should be on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate list, it should be the ACLU. By the way, did you know the founder of the ACLU, Roger Baldwin, was in Margaret Sanger's early radical bohemian Marxist salons in Greenwich Village, New York in 1912 and 1913 as they were plotting how to take down Western civilization and usher in neo-pagan Marxist revivalism? Like that, the ACLU goes back to hangout gatherings full of sex and alcohol, talking about the evils of Christendom and the Catholic Church with Margaret Sanger and the founder of the ACLU. Just so you know kind of the seeds of the ACLU. The ACLU has sued Indiana because they say it's cruel and unusual punishment to prevent Indiana taxpayer dollars funding to slice a child murderer's penis off. Okay? That's cruel and unusual punishment. Why do we take any of these people seriously? Like, this podcast should be illegal. None of this should be allowed to be possible. So, how about this? If you strangle a baby to death and joke about it years later, you should get the death penalty. That's my hot take. I think that Jonathan Richardson, who calls his stepdaughter that he strangled to death a effing little bitch, should have been hung in the public square within 48 hours of that incident. How about that? That's what I think being pro-life means. This is turning out to be a lot more of a Tabasco episode than I intended it to be. Understand this, okay? The liberal worldview maintains that capital punishment for Jonathan Richardson is unnecessary and evil, but using your taxpayer dollars to slice his genitals off is a necessary and loving act. Welcome to the fruit of liberalism. It's only a matter of time, by the way, until Jonathan Richardson, who wants to be called Autumn Corleone, demands to be transferred to a prison comprised of people who match his gender identity. You're aware of this happening in the country, right? The Me Too movement ought to be up in arms about all of this, of course, right? There have been several cases in the last 3 years, just the last 3 years, of dudes claiming to be women to be housed in female prisons. And sometimes, guess what happens when dudes who haven't sliced off their penis yet get transferred to a woman's prison because their gender identity is female? Guess what happens in some of these cases? I bet you can't guess. Are you in your car? Are you headed to work? Okay, this is not a family-friendly episode today. Turn down the volume. Okay, put on something else for the kids. The women at the women's prisons get pregnant. Oh, I could have never predicted it. Are you telling me that dudes that pretend to get off by being the opposite gender will identify as females so that they can be housed in women's prisons, shower with them and rape them and get their rocks off? Oh, I could have never predicted that one. By the way, in California, the Democrats not only predicted this, they helped manufacture it. They didn't just predict this would happen, they helped manufacture it. According to a report from 2021 from the Women's Liberation Front, the Central California Women's Facility had added new pregnancy resources to its medical clinics, including information on how to obtain an abortion. The Women's Liberation Front says, this was in 2021, that women incarcerated at the facility have been put into unacceptable situations resulting from the passage of legislation in California allowing transgender, intersex, and non-binary inmates the right, regardless of anatomy, to choose whether to be housed in a male or female prison. Okay, so the Women's Liberation Front, they're like old school feminists. And what I mean by old school feminists is that they don't like the tranny revolution because they're like, hold up. We might like to kill our children because we're bra-burning Woodstock feminists that want the right to orgasms without responsibility, but we also believe that women exist and that we can know what a woman is. And we actually have like criteria for what a man is, and that they're like different. And so because they're like different, like women should have like the right to like shower in their locker room without a dude walking in naked who says that they're not Sam, but they're Sally. Okay, so the Women's Liberation Front, kind of the old school feminists who, by the way, I'll totally go to war with you, okay, to destroy the transgender movement. I just wish that the old school feminists recognize that transgenderism is the inevitable and natural conclusion of the feminist ideology that they all have already imbibed. That's an interesting episode, by the way. We should talk about that more sometime. But basically, feminism says a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Do you remember that? And that there's nothing unique or distinct between men and women, at least socially. Obviously, biologically, the old school feminists would say that there's differences. But like our roles in society are just the coincidental, contextual outplaying of Christianity that's kept women under the thumb of the patriarchy, but really men and women's roles are socially constructed and have no basis in objective reality or any type of natural order. So it's just a coinkydink that Western civilization has generally preferred women to stay in the home and nurse and mother their children while dad works and is home in the evenings. Of course, but prior to the Industrial Revolution, fathers were actually at home with their mothers and families most of the day anyways, with the exception of a few unique careers. That's also a conversation for another time. But basically, men and women are the same. And women don't need men because they're not a natural complement to one another. In fact, they can be mixed and matched. So therefore, we have to have same-sex marriage because there's nothing unique that men and women bring to the table. Women need a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Okay, it's just all purely coincidental. It's just a coincidental turn of nature that men are protectors and providers and women are home, makers and caregivers. That's just coincidental. So we can replace one another any day of the week. So obviously we have to legalize same-sex marriage because men and women are fundamentally the same. And there's nothing unique that a man brings to a marriage or to parenting that a woman can't bring to the same degree and in the same kind. So what's wrong with having two women be married or two men be married? Well, then what's the next iteration from the feminist ideology? Well, men can become women. If all of this is just a random coincidence of nature and there's no lawgiver or lawmaker or creator, then man and woman can recreate themselves in their own image. And if a man wants to be a woman, what should prevent him from doing that anyways? Okay? So as much as I love the old school feminists, I think we need to remind them that transgenderism is the inevitable and ultimate conclusion of feminism. Fascinating. We'll talk about that more some other time. Maybe we'll get Nancy Pearcey back on the show to dig into that deeper. She's really the best on that. So what am I saying? I'm saying the old school feminists who still have a dose of reality, okay, in their lives are pissed off at California Democrats and lawmakers who passed legislation allowing men to go into the women's prisons if they said that they're women. How sick are California Democrat lawmakers? Well, in 2021, thanks to a Democrat pornography-loving male legislator with the last name Wiener. That's actually his last name. I'm not making that up. I didn't just say that to make you laugh. His name's actually, is it Scott Wiener? I think it's Scott Wiener, in California. Yeah, that's right. Who has been at pride rallies wearing shirts showing the California bear having sex with the state of California with a shirt that says California. So that's Scott Wiener, okay? Who's been behind laws and bills that actually reduce penalties for sexual criminals and pedophiles. Wow. Well, one of his bills was SB 132, which allows transgender, non-binary, and intersex inmates to be housed in the prison they feel best aligns with their gender identity. Shortly after that, listen to this. Listen to what I said about California Democrat progressives, not just predicting this would happen, but manufacturing the environment in which people like Jonathan Richardson could say, I want to be put in a prison with all the girls. Okay. They later passed AB 732, passed improving the quality of the healthcare and accommodations of pregnant people in California jails and prisons, if you are pregnant or become pregnant, said Assembly Bill 732, you have rights and access to the following, among which are pregnancy termination and emergency contraception. Pregnancy termination for pregnant people in women's prisons? By the way, I thought pregnant people were called women, but I guess men can give birth. I don't know if they're I don't know if they push the child out through their urethra or exactly how that works, but we have to call them pregnant people now, I guess, according to the dogma of political correctness. So Assembly Bill 732 says that people in prisons can get pregnancy terminations. But wait, the only people who could get pregnancy terminations in reality and not cuckoo la la land would be women. And women are put in, follow me, women's prisons. So if women in women's prisons are getting pregnant, then it must mean that there's dudes in the women's prisons and they're having sex with or raping the female inmates. So in other words, California Democrats first passed the bill that allowed men to identify as ladies to be put into the women's prisons, and then passed a bill to clean up their own mess because female inmates were getting pregnant because they were being raped by autogynephilic chauvinist rapists to provide abortions at taxpayer expense to clean up the own mess of their first policy. That's how sick California Democrat lawmakers are, okay? By the way, one inmate spoke to, her name's Amy Ichikawa, the founder of Woman to Woman. And this is an inmate in a female prison in California who said it was as if the government of California had given the okay for transgender inmates to rape us because you had a plan to take care of the aftermath, which was Assembly Bill 732. So I know it feels like we're on a rabbit trail right now, but listen, it's only a matter of time until this child murderer, eunuch-seeking inmate, Jonathan Richardson, who wants to be called Autumn Corteleone, requests to be transferred to a female prison where he will then begin to rape female inmates if Indiana taxpayer dollars didn't already pay to have his penis sliced off. Okay, they call that gender-affirming healthcare, but it's anything but that, obviously. By the way, do you want to know what gender-affirming healthcare is? It's when your son comes to you and says, "Daddy, I think I'm a girl." And you say, "Son, you're not. You're a boy. That's how God created you, and you will never become a woman." That's gender-affirming healthcare, okay? So when transgenderism meets hashtag Me Too, transgenderism wins every time, okay? And this is why the old-school feminists have to find a little bit of courage and make it their wholesale mission to obliterate transgenderism and its ideological implications from public life entirely. Or else women will have zero rights in this republic anymore. Because here's the reason behind this. Because transgenderism is the fulfillment of the liberal orthodoxy. Transgenderism is the fulfillment of the liberal orthodoxy. It's the fulfillment of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's mystery passage in Planned Parenthood v. Casey in 1992, when he said, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life." Seth, what does that mean? Good question. At the heart of liberty, said Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, is the right to define your own concept of the mystery of human life. So you can redefine human life itself to whatever aligns with your current and fleeting definition of what human flourishing and the good life means for you. Which, for the left, basically just means orgasms. Do you understand that? Like the fruit of liberalism in the 21st century is orgasms without responsibility. That's all that is. Liberalism is the belief that we have the right to define our own concept of existence, of what it means to be human, right? Remember, of the mystery of human life. I get to define what it means to be human. There you go. There's liberalism in one phrase for you. Liberalism is the belief that I can redefine what it means to be human. Doesn't matter that we were given those answers in Genesis 1 through 3. No. The serpent told me that if I eat the apple, I'll get woke. Well, my eyes will be opened and then I shall be as gods. So I guess Eve's eyes were slightly closed, which means God wasn't allowing her to see all of reality. And so wokeism is the belief that you'll see reality for how it really is, because the scales of Christendom and the chauvinist patriarchy will fall from your eyes. Then you'll truly be woke and you'll see reality for what it is. I hope you understand that like Eve eating the apple is the first wokeification story, and we've been downstream from that event ever since. Someone on X or Twitter the other day put out this thing saying, like, can someone point to me? Can someone highlight the point at when everything went wrong, when all the bleep hit the fan? And someone just posted a picture of Adam and Eve in the garden eating the apple. I was like, exactly. Liberalism, whatever you want to call it, there's many things we could call it. You call it secularism, you could call it Darwinism, you could call it materialism, you could call it neo-Malthusianism, you could call it Hillary Clinton and Klaus Schwabism. It's all the same thing, is man's attempt to recreate himself in his own image. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own meaning of existence, of meaning, and of the mystery of human life. Okay? So, when transgenderism meets Me Too, transgenderism must win, because it's the final iteration of liberalism where we don't even know what a man or a woman is anymore, and we can actually recreate our gender, allegedly, to match our true, authentic identity that I feel like I am on the inside. Do you understand? It's Genesis 2 flipped upside down. Okay, like, do you understand this now about liberalism? They will enter any institution. Okay, they will hollow it out from within, and then they'll wear it like a skin suit and say, "Look, it's ye old streams of liberty. Look, it's ye old Christendom," but it's not. It's a manufactured version. It's a twisted inversion. It's filled with a serpent. Okay, that really explains the conflict between Christianity and liberalism going all the way back to Eden. So if real women with real natural rights to not be abused get in the way of the liberal orthodoxy of redefining reality, then they, just like preborn women, will be sacrificed on the altar of modernity. And by the way, the political reason for this is significant, because if they can liberate themselves even from the constraints of human nature itself, which has borders, boundaries, and definitions, then there will be no end to their political project. And that's always been the point, to entirely upend society and recreate it in their own image. But the great conservative consolation is this: reality always reasserts itself in the end. This is a fascinating little tidbit, and I think we need to begin speaking in more pithy, Tabasco spicy sort of phrases that shake people's moral and spiritual intuitions and awaken them. We need to recognize really how stupid most of the lies of modernity are by recognizing those kinds of common sense, self-evident truths that our forefathers took as axiomatic. Here's a funny one-liner, okay, to turn liberalism on its head and maybe awaken some moderates who are trying to straddle the fence politically and culturally right now to join us in defending just the most basic concepts of human nature and reality itself. Did you know that by the time they're 3 months old, babies start to distinguish between male and female faces, and they prefer mom? So elites might not be able to know what a woman is, but babies do. By the way, that's like scientifically accurate. By the time they're 3 months old, babies begin to distinguish between male and female faces, and they prefer mother. They prefer mommy. So babies know what a woman is, but elites don't. Why? Because that's what liberalism does. Okay? It seeks to remake everything. It seeks to question everything, right? It's that cynicism, right? That criticism of everything that we used to take as self-evident. Right? Do I really exist? Does the cow I'm milking really exist? How do I know I'm not just a meat puppet in the hands of some puppeteer How do I know I exist? If a tree falls in a forest and nobody hears it, did it really fall? That sort of cynicism that comes with liberalism corrupts everything. But babies don't fall prey to those stupid lies because they live in reality and they may not yet be able to exercise all the cognitive abilities we do. But what a interesting criticism of liberalism in the 21st century, that 3-month-old babies outside the utero have a greater clarity on what a woman is than most elites do in our culture today. Wow, well, I really got carried away there. So what are we talking about? Jonathan Richardson, who wants to be called Autumn Corleone. Fox News continues and says, the surgery for Richardson, who is serving out a 55-year prison sentence for reckless homicide, is a medical necessity, according to the ACLU lawsuit. Judge Richard Young agreed with the ACLU's claims and ruled in favor of Corleone last week. Corleone, meaning Jonathan Richardson, who wants to be called Autumn and wants Indiana taxpayer dollars to pay to slice off his family jewels. Fox continues and says, specifically, Miss Corleone, insert Jonathan Richardson, has shown that her, meaning his, gender dysphoria is a serious medical need, and that despite other treatments, defendant has provided her to treat her, meaning his, gender dysphoria. She, meaning him, requires gender-affirming surgery to prevent a risk of serious bodily and physiological harm, the ruling states. That's the ACLU. Yes. The classic, if you don't pay for me to carve off my family jewels, I'll be so distraught that I'll begin harming myself and possibly committing suicide argument. You've heard this, right? What do they say? Better to have an alive son than a dead daughter. By the way, this is the number one political, cultural, sociological argument used to mainstream transgenderism and to shut down the critiques of the opponents of transgender ideology and its implications in the public square, right? And it's how they coerce parents who have tragic cases of gender-confused minors into shutting up and going along with the social affirmation, the pronoun usage, eventually the puberty blockers, eventually the cross-sex hormones, and finally, if you follow transgenderism to its final iteration, surgical castration so that they can never have children again, fulfilling the fruit of eugenic thought, of the seeds that launched the American Eugenic Society and Planned Parenthood and UNESCO and the United Nations and CICUS as we know it today, that we need to drastically reduce the world population through neo-Malthusian eugenics because we just have too many people on planet Earth. Interesting, Planned Parenthood as probably the foremost eugenic organization in the early 20th century is still doing eugenics. They're sterilizing people so they can never have children again. Interesting. Anyways, the argument is if you don't do the whole tranny playbook suggested acts, then then this person's going to kill themselves because their body doesn't match their inward authentic identity. And so until you chop things up on the outside to make it feel more like the inside, then they'll continue to experience gender dysphoria that will be so traumatic to them that they'll eventually commit suicide because they can't handle living in the wrong body. That's the argument, okay? Now, is that true? The largest data set that's ever been done on mental health following transgender intervention suggests that after transgender intervention, the patient actually has increased anxiety. The best research shows that those who undergo chemical and surgical transition are over 19 times more likely to commit suicide than the average person. That is the complete inversion of what we're told. Shocker, once again, liberalism takes reality, flips it on its head, and masquerades it as a skin suit to convince you it's the same thing. It's the entire opposite of what you've been told. The best research and largest data set on mental health following transgender intervention suggests that those who undergo such transitions are 19 times more likely to commit suicide than the average person. By the way, you can get this. It's called Long-Term Follow-Up of Transsexual Persons Undergoing Sex Reassignment Surgery, Cohort Study in Sweden, with a bunch of names that are hard for me to pronounce, okay? So that's where you can find that data set. By the way, the entire ideology and worldview of transgenderism is actually based on a dude who did kill himself because of transgender intervention in the first place. Like, you can't make this stuff up. If you don't tran your kid, they're going to kill themselves because their physical body isn't matching their gender identity. Also, the first person we tried that on killed themselves because of the surgical intervention. That's the truth behind the transgender movement lies. It was John Money. John Money, who has actually one of the researchers with Wardell Pomeroy into gender studies, okay? And Wardell Pomeroy was one of Alfred Kinsey's gay lovers, who became the director of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University after Alfred Kinsey died in the 60s. And Wardell Pomeroy was part of the incest movement, actually, and gave an interview to Time magazine in 1980 called Attacking the Last Taboo, where he said incest between children and adults can sometimes be beneficial and need not be a sign of mental illness. And that guy did research with Alfred Kinsey to try to convince the West that children were sexual from birth. And they got that data by interviewing pedophiles and rapists in prison, serving lifetime prison sentences for sexual crimes. So John Money was running in the same circles as the Kinseyan sort of sexual theorists, okay, and materialists of the 50s and really the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And John Money founded the Gender Identity Clinic at Johns Hopkins University in 1967 or 1968. And the parents of the Reimer twins had a botched circumcision on their son David Reimer. And so they took David to John Money, and John Money advised that they completely surgically castrate David Reimer, construct rudimentary female genitals, raise David Reimer as a boy named Brenda, introduce dolls and dresses, and in puberty introduce estrogen, and never tell, quote unquote, Brenda that he's actually a boy named David who had a botched circumcision. Then John Money forced David and his twin brother to perform sexual acts on one another at the Johns Hopkins University, and he had his researchers photograph them as they were naked and performing these forced sexual acts on one another. By the time David found out at the damage done to his body and forced the truth out of his father, he spent thousands of dollars reversing the surgical damage done to his body, found a young woman, got married, adopted 2 or 3 children, and years later shot himself in the head because of the damage that was done to him because of the first transgender theorists whose first experiment was to surgically castrate someone, introduce opposite sex hormones, and raise the person as the opposite gender. The first transgender experiment resulted in that person killing themselves, as opposed to the lies today that say if you don't introduce cross-sex hormones and surgical intervention and gender affirmation, they will kill themselves. That is the perverted upside-down lies of the transgender movement and ideology in America today. Right here on the Seth Gruber Show. Okay, like, what? Do you understand how much we've been lied to in the culture? So, when the ACLU attorneys say that if Jonathan Richardson doesn't get this gender-affirming surgery, then he's going to start doing bodily and physiological harm to himself. He might kill himself if we don't give this to him. No, I've got your number. Okay? The article continues and says the DOC, which was the Department of Corrections, must now take all reasonable actions to ensure Corleone undergoes sex surgery according to the order. Thankfully, Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita, a Republican, said in a post on X that his office is still reviewing the judge's decision. And he said, but you can undoubtedly expect our office to appeal this decision. Good. The original ACLU filing says Corleone, Jonathan Richardson, was diagnosed in 2020 with gender dysphoria and prescribed female hormones and testosterone blockers, both of which he has consistently taken since that time. Other accommodations provided for the inmate include panties, makeup, and form-fitting clothing. Do you understand what this is? Okay, there's a term for this. It's called autogynephilia. Okay, it's the sexual arousal associated with fantasizing or picturing yourself as the other gender. But now it's going to happen at taxpayer expense to child murderer inmates. The rotten fruit of liberalism. Accordingly, at this point, gender-affirming surgery is necessary so that his physical identity can be aligned with his gender identity, and so his gender dysphoria can be ameliorated, the lawsuit says. He believes that the only remedy for his persistent gender dysphoria and the serious harm it causes his, is to receive gender-affirming surgery, specifically an okay, I forgot how to say this word. An orchiectomy and vaginoplasty, it said. You know what that means, right? Chop off the penis and construct rudimentary female genitals with skin taken off of your arm or leg and using that flesh to construct a fake vagina. What do I even say? What do I even say? They won't define marriage, therefore they won't protect it. They won't define the unborn, therefore they won't protect them. They won't define a woman, therefore they won't protect them. Pay attention. Pay attention. Who will the liberal establishment claim that they don't really have a definition for anymore? Because the science has revealed new findings about embryology and gender identity. And we just have to follow the science. We don't really know if the baby's a baby. We don't really know if the dude can't be a woman. We don't really know what a Christian is. What is a parent really? You know? Because men and women are basically the same. So, what's the difference really between two mommies and two daddies or a mommy and a daddy? We're just all interchangeable after all, aren't we? Men and women are superfluous. So, I guess the state now has to define what a parent is and who qualifies as one. Because parenthood is no longer based on biology and the needs of children. So what's a parent? Notice, watch this. Who will the liberal establishment in America seek to redefine next or cast doubt over fundamental definitions about human nature? If they can defy the constraints of human nature itself and redefine everything, then there's no end to their political project. And maybe that was always the point. Maybe that was always the point. The article at Fox concludes saying, Corleone has identified as a woman since 6 years old, the ACLU lawsuit claims. And the inmate, according to the ACLU, is, quote, a woman trapped in a man's body. There you go. There you go. So when we joke, about transgenderism as women trapped in men's bodies and men trapped in women's bodies, and how do you get them out? Well, for me, I was a man trapped in a woman's body, but then I was born. See? But what they mean is something different. When we joke about this stuff, that's the language they use. That's the ACLU lawsuit. This inmate is a woman trapped in a man's body. So biology apparently no longer provides any clues to our real identity, right? It gives no definitions. It offers no moral or sociological markers. It's just all random stuff. And so it can be reshaped to fit the preferences of the majority or the preferences and desires of the state. Do you understand? When you redefine the most basic fundamental institutions, then everything is chaos. And I'm simply suggesting that maybe that was by design. Before we wrap up this episode, I want to thank our sponsors at Every Life Diaper Company. EveryLife.com, the pro-life diaper company for America. Almost every major baby company industry, diaper manufacturer, rhetorically or financially supports the abortion industry. If you want to defund the culture of death, fight with your dollars, and rebuild a culture of life, come on, wouldn't it be great to bankrupt Marxist pro-abortion, anti-family companies? I think that would be awesome. But you got to fight with your wallet too. So if you have babies or loved ones with babies, pregnancy resource centers, or the nursery at your church, go to everylife.com, promo code Seth10, Seth10, for 10% off your first order, and let them know that we sent you. You support the Seth Gruber Show, you support the White Rose Resistance, and you help rebuild a culture of life in the marketplace by fighting with your dollars, because money talks, baby. Money talks. Everylife.com, promo code Seth10. Thank you, Every Life, for sponsoring the Seth Gruber Show. So I want to jump into the last aspect of this crazy, crazy episode on a baby killer wanting to become a eunuch and making your tax dollars pay for it by leveling up the conversation to a theological playing field just a little bit. I want to tell you that baby killing is always inextricably linked to weird sex stuff and gender-bending cults. Okay? I'm talking about Baal and Ishtar. Okay? I'm talking about Baal and Astaroth. Okay? Or the Asherah poles in the Old Testament. By the way, this is really interesting. In Canaanite mythology, Ishtar or Ashtaroth was connected to Baal. And he often appears as his wife or consort. So Baal and Ishtar were often going together. We see this in Judges 6 as well, when Gideon tears down all of the high places of child sacrifice and temple prostitute orgy sex cults. Those were the two pagan gods in Judges 6. It's a Baal, baby sacrifice, and Ishtar, otherwise known as Asherah, same goddess, same demon, identified with the Asherah poles, where the temple prostitute, sex cult, orgy stuff would happen, okay? They always go together. In the Old Testament, it says that they forsook the Lord and served Baal and the Ashtoreths. From the beginning, the two gods, Baal and Ashtaroth, or Ishtar, were linked together. In 1 Samuel, when the people repent of their apostasy, they cry out saying, "We have sinned because we have forsaken the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths." Okay? So you see this throughout the Old Testament over and over and over again. Baal and Ishtar, or the Asherah poles, always go together. Historians believe that the cults of Ashtoreth worked in tandem with the cults of Baal and Moloch. This is a very interesting sort of history lesson that Jonathan Cahn has unveiled in a lot of his historical research in his book, Harbinger and the Return of the Gods, and some of his writings. Because you see, babies created through adultery and orgies in the temples or with temple prostitutes provided sacrifices for the gods. This is why today Planned Parenthood is not only the largest abortion provider in the world, Baal, they're also the largest provider of the pornographic, obscene, comprehensive sexuality education and gender theory in America's public schools, Ishtar, Asherah poles. So sex ed is their sales funnel, abortion is their product, and your children are their prospects. You see, Baal requires Asherah. They're two different sides of the same child commodifying coin, okay? When you worship Ishtar through orgies and adulterous sex affairs, 9 months later, you got to do something with the baby, so you pass it through the fire. Those two sins have been linked since time immemorial. But Ishtar, her images and idols are found throughout the Middle Eastern world, and she's often portrayed as androgynous. Do you know what androgynous means? Both male and female characteristics. What is a woman? Is it a man? Is it a woman? It's a drag queen. I don't really know. Kind of hard to tell, right? I mean, have you seen some of these people, by the way? Have you had the unfortunate displeasure of being around people, dudes whose gender transition is in such a final phase that, like, you weren't sure for a second? I mean, listen, there were a couple times where I was like, oh, that was a dude? Like, it's like, no. It's like, it's not that I don't know how to identify a dude. It's like, that's how successful some of these eunuch procedures have become with the drugs and the surgeries. A couple times I was like, oh, that was a dude? Okay, like, but Ishtar, weird sex cults, gender cults, Asherah poles, Old Testament, demon worship, always identified as androgynous, both male and female characteristics, okay? She's also the same demon that the scriptures refer to as the name Asherah. She was known as the queen of heaven and the goddess of sex. And that's the same demon that is referred to or identified with the Asherah poles in the Old Testament. But she was also believed to have the ability to change a person's gender. Okay, now this is where it gets super weird. Okay, now listen, there's an ancient Sumerian hymn that talks about Ishtar's power to, quote, turn a man into a woman and a woman into a man to change one into the other. Like, Jonathan Cahn has, like, found this old ancient world scripts on tablets and, like, ritual practices and hymns and chants revealing how the ancients viewed, worshipped and described their demon gods that they would worship. Lastly, there's an ancient inscription from southern Turkey saying, "May Ishtar impress feminine parts into his male parts." What the... Dude, what the what? That's literally what Jonathan Richardson wants Indiana lawmakers to do, is to impress a vaginoplasty into where his penis used to be. Do you understand it's all just demon worship? Like, do you understand now? Like, all human conflict is ultimately theological. There's nothing new under the sun, I guess. Okay. Oh yeah. And then to top it all off, ancient records suggest that Ishtar, a demon, would have her male priests surgically castrate themselves to appear in the more androgynous form of their goddess. Eunuchs! We're not going into progressivism. We're going into regressivism. We're going back to ancient pagan weird sex cults and demon worship that are being resuscitated in the name of progress and are animating every new iteration of the secular progressive moral revolution's culture of death today that questions everything, turns everything on its head to remake the world in its own image. That is the rotten fruit of liberalism. Is Anthony Kennedy's famous Planned Parenthood v. Casey Supreme Court decision inscription, "At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the mystery of human life." It's all a mystery. We don't know what it means. So liberty means my right to define reality, to define what it means to be human. I think it was C.S. Lewis who said, "For the power of man to make himself what he pleases means, as we have always seen, the power of some men to make other men what they please." Let the reader understand. Thanks for tuning in to the Seth Gruber Show today. Head on over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Give the show a rating and review. Hit 5 stars on iTunes, but go subscribe at Rumble, will you? Because I'm telling you, at one point, Google, who owns YouTube, coming after me, man. I had 2 strikes within a 3-month period. If you get 3 strikes in 90 days, you're done. They're trying to digitally assassinate my channel. It's been growing like by thousands of subscribers every 30 days, every month. So go subscribe at YouTube, but insulate us by subscribing at Rumble if I'm ever Hillary Clinton off of YouTube. Go to thewhiterose.life and join us as an ally of the White Rose Resistance at $35 a month, or join at Air Support at $70 a month, and you join our book club. Either way, you get a battle box in the mail, and you join our digital community on Circle, where we have courses and curriculum and a pro-life masterclass and live engagement with our team and engagement with our chapters we're launching around the country and other donors to be an encouragement. It's super cool, and live calls, and AJ Hurley at the White Rose Resistance, coming out with a podcast, going to be airing exclusively for donors and allies and above on the Circle donor platform. Go to thewhiterose.life and join us, and host a screening of the 1916 Project at your church. Go to the1916project.com. Order your book, The 1916 Project, The Lying, the Witch, and the War We're In. Go order the book. Host a screening at your church of the groundbreaking 75-minute full-length documentary, The 1916 Project, coming out in October, this fall, very, very soon, releasing on X, okay, the freest platform right now. We're trying to get Elon Musk to watch the film right now, so pray for us. And get ready, buckle up, announcing today for the first time on the Seth Gruber Show, Life or Death Con. Life or Death Con. We're doing a conference in D.C. the day before the March for Life called Life or Death Con, because we need new, bold, unapologetically Christian leadership in the pro-life movement right now. Because after the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the pro-life movement is very fragmented. We're not very united on the best steps forward culturally and politically to protect the preborn. The pro-life movement used to go by another name, remember? Christendom, Christianity. Pro-life is just Christianity 101. It's believers saving babies. Okay? It's pretty basic, guys, okay? Kind of the heart of the gospel. Go to lifeordeathcon.com, lifeordeathcon.com, and join us the day before the March for Life. I think that's January 23rd, 2025 in Washington, D.C. at the Westin Hotel to hear Ali Bestucky, Eric Metaxas, Myself, Dr. George Grant, Pastor Andrew Cedra from Washington. Remember the guy who's going to get arrested in the next 5 years for preaching about marriage and gender and the Bible in Australia? And many, many more. lifeordeathcon.com. And if you're an ally of the White Rose Resistance at $35 a month or more, you get your ticket free to Life or Death Con. lifeordeathcon.com. Until next episode, guys, thank you for joining the Seth Gruber Show.